Hey, it's Dan, and welcome to Unified Gaming. So in this one, we're going to play Trash or Grab, the game where we check the golden vendor to see if it's absolute trash or are there items worth grabbing. We'll also touch upon the Infinite Archive and the Scolarium for scripts and so on. As with this one, it is worth noting that the items do change week on week, and this is recorded on the 29th of June 2024. So if you are watching this in the future, things will be different. As for the golden vendor, where do you find her? She can be located in Cyrodiil in every home base. If you play on DC, she's in Northern High Rock. If you play on AD, she's down in the Western Elsewhere Gate. And if you play on EP Ebonheart Pat, she's in the Southern Morrowind Gate. As I said, she does appear every weekend, and she appears from Saturday to Monday, and then she will disappear. If you want to stay up to date with the series and with what items are worth buying, or just for the channel generally for builds and much more, then subscribing is really appreciated. Likes and comments also help. And I want to say a massive thank you to everyone on YouTube and on Patreon who are members and support the content. They get early access, exclusive builds, and much more. There's details down below. With the golden vendor, what is she selling this week? First up, she has some jewellery for sale. She's got Storm Knight. Storm Knight is a tanking set that kind of does damage as well. So when you take non-physical damage, so basically magic, you will deal a bit of shock damage around you, and it will scale based on your weapon and spell damage. It's a really weird set because the scaling is on weapon and spell damage, but because of the nature of how you'd actually use this, with it being armor, health, it's a tank set. So on a tank, it has low damage, but on a DPS, it can have okay-ish damage. So I would kind of avoid this, in all honesty. It's not the best. There are better sets out there. It's a bit of fun. That's about it. And for PvE, if you want to kind of proc bosses and stuff to death with a tank, you could do this. It will just take a long time. So I would suggest avoiding this. And this is bind and equip, so you can trade this anyway with other players. The next item we have is the Storm Cursed Revenge set. This is again, similar sort of theme. It's a shock based set. So when you deal shock damage, you have a 15% chance to deal additional damage to the enemy and to other people. This will scale off your weapon or spell damage. This is a really cool idea. The damage on it is pretty nice. The problem is, there's not many skills in the game that has shock damage as its like tag, which means you can't proc this reliably. You've got Wall of Elements, you've got Crushing Shock, and Fool's Pulse will kind of have it. There's not much else. Bound of Storm, the Liquid Lightning from Sorcerer. You're kind of getting towards the end of the shock skills in the game. There's not that many more. So you're going to really struggle to proc this reliably. Whereas if this was just on any damage like Templar, this would be good at Templar then, because you could proc this easily. So my advice would be to skip this as well. It's not worth it. It's a fun set, but there are better sets, especially for Sorcerer. And that's for PvE and PvP. Both of these are just skip. You then have Storm Masters. This is a necklace, and again, it's a interesting set. I would probably recommend getting this if you don't have this. It is quite a good set. How it works is when you deal critical damage with a fully charged heavy attack, your light attacks and heavy attacks do an additional 1500 to monsters. It is an exclusive PvE set. That is it. It works in PvE and nothing else. With that in mind, it's a really good heavy attack set. This with Sergeant's Mail, is really good. There are better sets, but this is a good set. It's not the best heavy attack sets in the game, in all honesty. There are better ones, but this is a good set to consider. If you're going to make a heavy attack build, Undaunted Infiltrator, Sergeant's Mail, really high DPS. Sergeant's Mail, Order's Wrath, really high DPS. This is fun, but it's worth considering. The next one you then have is Thunderbug's Necklace. And again, this is shock damage. When you take physical damage, you deal 1900 shock damage to enemies in a 5 meter radius around you, and it has a 3-second cooldown, but again, scales with your weapon and spell damage. It is exactly the same problem that Storm Knight has. Because the scaling is on weapon and spell damage, but it's all armor essentially. It's a tank set, it's heavy armor. It's quite hard to get damage out of this set, and then you end up limiting you're just damaged generally. So I would avoid this too. Like, it's a fun set. It's good in battlegrounds for like low level MMRPGs where people are a bit easier to kill. You can play a bit more with sets, but beyond that, it's not great. And for PvE, it's the same problems again. As with the monster sets, we have Scourge Harvester. This is quite a good set, actually. When you take damage, you have a 10% chance to tether to an enemy for 6 seconds. As you're tethered to them, you do a bit of damage, nothing major, but you get major vitality, which increases your healing and your shields by 12%. And it's got a 6-second cooldown. This scales of max health. The damage isn't the main thing, it's the major vitality. This is really good. If you are on a magical warden, for example, you're in melee range quite often, this is a really good set for you. So if you're in PvP, this is definitely worth considering. Really, really, really good set. The one thing to note is that yes, the chance is 10%, but with that in mind, because dots, burning, concussed, chilled, status effects, all those little things, and people with light attack weaving will count. This is up really high. It's got a really high uptime, so I would recommend getting this if you don't have it. The other advantage as well is because it's shoulders, you can save yourself some keys. So what you'll notice is I'm missing one weight here, so I'm going to buy the weight just to finish this. And if you're like me, where I find AP a bit more useful because you can get impen than infused, I will keep the AP for ones that I really will use. This I would use, but I'd probably transmute this to well fitted or to impen, or I might even transmute this to something like divines on some builds. So I'm going to buy this just for the sticker book and keep the AP. The last monster set we have is Stormfist. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a Thunder Fist that crushes enemies, and then after 3 seconds it does more damage. And it explodes with a massive 11,000 hit. It's a lot of damage, but this misses all the time in PvP. For PvP, this is awful, in all honesty. I can't recall when I've been hit by this final hit. And I can't recall when I've hit other people with this either. It misses too much. So I would not buy this for PvP. If you're playing PvE, however, it's not a bad DPS set. It's not the best. There are better sets in my opinion, but this is still a good set to consider getting. So for that reason alone, I'd probably suggest getting this for PvE if you have no monster sets whatsoever, because you can buy the shoulders here and just do the dungeon, and then you have a full monster set that will be somewhat useful, especially if you're new to the game. So my recommendation for this is buy these if you are new, do the dungeon on that to get the helmet, and then you've got a full monster set which will give you a big power boost than what you currently have, and then you can work on getting a proper build set up. So I would get this, and again, it's a decent enough set. I've got all of this already. But that there, guys, is the golden. We're now going to go and touch upon the Infinite Archive, where we'll look at the scripts. We'll also look at the leads, because some of the leads do give us really good mythic items. And then we'll touch upon the Scolarium and talk about what scripts do they have for sale there, and whether there are any that are worth buying. For the Infinite Archive, it's located in Apocrypha, and it's located in the north. Once inside, we're going to be looking for the vendor called Filer All. He is a vendor that appears, I think it's Tuesday to Tuesday, but we just did this in one video, and he will sell scripts and stuff for you. He is located in the far east of the archive, right at the back. And this week he is selling the following. At the top he has a lead for a table, chest. It's cosmetic, it's housing, it doesn't affect the game, like gameplay wise, so I would leave this. And then he has the rune scribed comb, which is for a music box, again a house furnishing. So if you're into housing and you want to get that, these are worth considering. This comb maybe, but I personally would ignore these. I don't think they're worth it. That's just how I play the game. And then for the actual things I think are worth considering are the scripts. So this week he has Force. The Force one is nice because it gives you access to minor force and a lot of skills. Now, with that said, one of the issues you do have, in my opinion, is the fact that lots of skills that you would actually use the Force on aren't good, and Race Against Time is a better skill. So in many instances, you'd probably skip this. There's one or two where this can be applied in an AoE or to a group. At that point, it's quite a good group buff. So if you have the fortunes, go and buy it. Please note that this is 2,000 for me because I know this already. But if I don't know, it's going to be 10 to 15,000. It's typically 5 times the base cost. So the base cost is 2,000 if you know it, but it's 10,000 if you don't. And only one character has to know this. The next one we have is Heroism. Heroism is just ult generation. Again, this is a really good thing to have. The issue you have is there's not many good skills you can put this on. When you kind of look at using scribing, the way I use it is it needs to improve my build. And Heroism, all the skills you could use don't really improve the build massively. So yes, you can get some use out of this on some things like DK where they have good ult gen passives and just ult use passives, but I wouldn't stress about getting this. If you don't have much fortunes, just save them, and I would probably skip this one today. You then have Mitigation. This will reduce your damage. It's really good. So if people hit you, you get more defense. It gives you like minor resolve. It's a good one to have. It's quite easy to get, and you can get minor protection out of this. So there's one for resolve and one for protection. This is the protection one essentially. You get minor protection on lots of sources in the game, like Ice Fortress has it, which Wardens gives to allies and stuff quite easily. You've got Temporal Guard, which people slot on the back bar in PvP for just passive mitigation. So you could use this, but I wouldn't rush out to buy it, if that makes sense. And the last one is Cavalier's Charge. This is quite a good one actually, and if you don't have this, I'd buy this. It's very expensive, but the Trample skill, which I'll touch upon in a moment, this will boost its damage. So if we look at our superstar, which has access to a scribing part, on Trample, you could something like physical damage, and then you can pick the Cavalier's Charge. This will increase the damage by 20% every 0.5 seconds, which means this gets like a 60% damage boost. Really, really good. And you can put any other affixes too. But the actual Cavalier's Charge is very, very, very good. So I would consider getting that one if you were to buy any of these. This is probably the best one. The Mitigation one is nice again, but as I said, when you go through the skills, there's not many options that have it. Contingency, you've got a bit of stuff down here, so you can get like an AoE here for allies. That's about it. So that's like the Mitigation one here, but the rest of it you wouldn't really use it on. And again, you probably wouldn't want to waste that. There's better uses for that skill. The last place is to go to the Scolarium, where I'm going to see what the vendor there has and how we could use it. And I'll showcase you what scripts we've seen and how you could put them to make some decent skills. But the Infinite Archive only has one in my opinion. At the Scolarium, you can access an additional vendor that will sell scripts on a weekly basis. This vendor is better in my opinion because he does sell them for gold. In order to access him, you have to complete the first wing, so the wing of the Indurk. Once you've completed this, the vendor will then appear. This has to be completed on one character only for your entire account. So as soon as this is done, you can do the introduction quest on an altar like I have here, and then you can go to the vendor. At the vendor, he will sell a rotating stock that will change week on week. This week, he is selling the following: Evasion, Shock Damage, Assassin's Misery. These are the 3 that he has. So Shock Damage, how could that be used? Shock Damage is very, very good on Sorcerer. So we're going to go to Willed Soul, Spammable, Shock Damage, and you can then use Class Mastery if you have this, or Druid's Resurgence. These are both really good options. Resurgence is sustain, Mastery is great damage on a Sorcerer because you get this bonus 1500 on a full build, and you could add on Breach. What you would get is a skill like this. On a full build, this is normally 10,000. It's about 10,000. This is 2,000, this shock damage here when it's fully buffed. And you got the Major Breach. This is the best Magicka spammable for Sorcerer, which is ridiculously good. So this is a phenomenal skill. And again, you can tweak this to keep the shock damage, but change to the sustain. And again, you've got a really good Stam sustain skill too. So you could even drop Dark Dark Deal, if you'll, or be able to use it more than you could normally. So this is a really, really good skill. So shock damage for that alone is 100% worth buying. Other classes don't have that much use out of it, so I would kind of skip that if you're not a sorcerer. You then have Assassin's Misery. This is a really weird script. This increases, it afflicts people with status effects, so burn and chilled concuss typically. I've been playing around with this, and the way that this works is on something like Elemental Explosion, you can put any of your choice. So shock if you want, frost, magic, it's all the same tooltip. On my like build, it's 26,000 the tooltip on this. It's ridiculously high. And with this, you can put Assassin's Misery. Assassin's Misery applies burning, chilled, and concussed, but those damage scale on your damage, which means this is actually more like burst damage. So out of all of these, this is like the best burst one. So for that reason alone, I'd recommend getting this. If you're going to play a AoE bomber and you want to mess around with this skill, this Misery is the best damage one for this. It is the best signature script here because the sustain's pretty bad. The masteries are bad generally. The War Mage is okay. The Immobilize is okay. The Snare's good for Dark Convergence. It does proc that. But this is bonus damage. It's really, really good. And then you got all the ones at the bottom. So I would personally use something like Defile, or I'd use something like Brittle, just to really boost that damage. Coward is also quite a nice one because it reduces their healing. Because they have less damage, they can't heal as much. So there's a few options down here. Defile is kind of what I go with. And this is what I'd use on a Nightblade Bomber, which I've been playing around with. This is a really good skill. The initial hit on a proper build is like 9 to 10,000 on a player. Then you got other skills with the other sets, so it's about 20, 25,000 burst with one button. It's really easy. So this is a really good skill. The final ones you have are essentially the evasion. The evasion isn't really great in my opinion. The problem that you have is there's not many Grimoires that you'd use that has evasion on it. Vault has evasion down here, which is good. This is a good one. But if you go to like Contingency, there's no real evasion there. If you go to Soul Burst, you don't really have any good ones down here. So again, there's no evasion. Torchbearer, no evasion. That's like good enough because this is minor at this point. Whereas Vault is major. So you either have minor on an AoE or you have major on the Vault. And at that point, it's not really worth it. So in my opinion, I'd kind of skip that unless you really want to spend the money. Like if you have the gold, buy it. I'm not going to say don't. If you've got the gold, buy it. But it's not worth wasting the money if you're not going to use it. But that's it really, guys. That's what the vendors are selling this week. There's some really good scripts. The items are a bit naff, in all honesty. But, you know, it's the roll of the dice. So I'll cover this again next week. If you get any questions about the gear and how to use them in a build, or the scripts and how to customize them for scribing and make good skills, let me know in the comments down below or join my Discord. But I want to say a massive thank you to all the likes and the subs. It really helps. It helps keep up to date with the channel and also the series. And it just helps me know that this is something that wants to be continued. I'm going to say a huge thanks to everyone at Patreon and on YouTube members who help support the content. If you want to do so, there's exclusives and stuff. There's details down below. But until the next video or stream, I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching. Take care. And bye.